Hey there, wake up. It's Means Morning News. Just after 11 a.m. on the East Coast in Washington, D.C., I'm the host, Sam Sachs. Good morning to everyone. It's the Friday show. We love our Friday show, don't we, folks? Some may say it's the best one of the week. Let's get to it. The National Transportation Safety Board released a preliminary report into what caused the derailment of a Norfolk Southern freight train in East Palestine, Ohio, about 3 weeks ago. As suspected, the agency is pointing to an overheated wheel bearing on the train's 23rd car as the culprit. Now, train tracks are equipped with heat sensors to catch this exact problem. According to the report, the train traversed across two sensors without any problematic reading. A third sensor 20 miles later, however, did indicate a problem, at which point the crew attempted to stop the train, but by then it was too late. The report doesn't indicate that there were any faulty sensors on the track, and it did show that the train was traveling below the required speed limit. But NTSB Chair Jennifer Homendy was quick to say that this was no accident, and that it was 100% preventable.
I can tell you this much, this was 100% preventable. We call things accidents. There is no accident. Every single event that we investigate is preventable.
Homendy went on to add that there might need to be some regulatory changes when it comes to heat sensors on the tracks, since the current distance between them provides more than enough time for a failure to happen before it's detected, as it appears is what happened in East Palestine. What she didn't address is what unionized rail workers have been saying for years, that the freight rail industry's reliance on precision scheduled railroading, or PSR, created the conditions for this derailment. PSR is a strategy rail companies use to cut costs and maximize profits by running smaller and smaller crews on larger and larger trains with more and more toxic cargo, all while cutting track and car maintenance costs. The train that derailed in East Palestine was 149 cars long, making it very difficult to stop, and it had a crew of just 2 people, plus 1 person who was being trained. On Thursday, Norfolk Southern did agree to one of the demands put forward by rail unions to improve track safety. It announced it will provide about 3,000 track maintenance workers with 4 paid days of sick leave, and that it would also scrap a company policy that required a 48-hour notice before taking personal leave. It's the third rail company this month to agree to paid sick leave for a portion of its workforce. Also, Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg finally arrived in East Palestine to survey the damage from the derailment. And Pete's boosters want everyone to know who the real victim of this fiasco is. That's right, it's Pete. Here was White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre claiming that Pete's been subjected to unfair criticism.
I do want to say one thing, though, which is there's been a lot of bad faith attacks on Secretary Buttigieg. And the reason why we believe it's bad faith is, if you remember Elaine Chao, she was the head of Department of Transportation, and when there was these types of chemical spills, nobody was calling for her to be fired. And nobody was calling for what they're calling on Secretary Pete.
You know what? Not a great look to compare Pete's tenure to that of Elaine Chao, who was installed as secretary to essentially cripple the department, a job which she performed well at the behest of then President Trump. The point is, what has Pete done in the 2 years he's been in the position to reverse the damage caused by deregulation, particularly during the prior administration? Nothing. He's done nothing. Hence the criticism. Politico reported that Buttigieg World is frustrated by the attacks he's been receiving. Oh, shucks. You must have confused me with someone who gives a shit. The United States rejected a ceasefire proposal put forward by China aimed at resuming peace talks to end the war in Ukraine. The plan includes 12 points, but none of them explicitly request a full withdrawal of Russian forces from Ukraine. Instead, the proposal makes a call to respect the sovereignty of all countries. It also advocates for an end to Cold War-era military alliances such as NATO and to create a new security framework in the region to, quote, forge a balanced, effective, and sustainable European security architecture. And it pushes for the rollback of what China describes as unilateral sanctions. In addition, the Chinese plan requests more involvement from international organizations like the United Nations and the International Atomic Energy Agency to protect nuclear power plants, to facilitate grain exports, and to resolve the humanitarian crisis. It also calls for the swap and humane treatment of prisoners of war, and for the international community to invest in post-conflict reconstruction efforts, which China said it was, quote, ready to provide assistance and play a constructive role in this endeavor. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg rejected the proposal and claimed China doesn't have any credibility on the issue. And the U.S. State Department continues to hurl allegations that Beijing is considering sending lethal weapons to Russia to aid the Kremlin's war effort, a claim that Beijing rejects. And let's be fair, the U.S. doesn't have much room to criticize other countries for supplying arms to this particular conflict. The Pentagon has facilitated dozens of weapons transfers to Ukraine since the invasion 1 year ago. As the Financial Times reported this week, defense industry stock prices have climbed since the start of the war, and a realization that this will be a prolonged conflict led to arms makers seeing a 30% gain since October. Russia's invasion of Ukraine was illegal. It should be condemned. In a just world, the Putin government would be tried for war crimes, but we don't live in a just world. International law has been eroded thanks in large part to the United States and its decades of military misadventure around the world. Believing that Putin should be tried at The Hague while George W. Bush gets to keep painting down in Texas is an unserious position. It simply doesn't reflect the way of the world today. Hopefully that changes in the future. But in the meantime, both the Ukrainian and Russian militaries and surrounding civilians are suffering huge losses. It's impossible to imagine this conflict ending in any way that is preferable to either side at this point. Moscow failed to dislodge the government in Kyiv, and the prospects of the Ukrainian army eventually pushing all Russian troops from territories in the east, including Crimea, are slim to none. Pursuing a ceasefire and a negotiated settlement are the only realistic options to end this war. The sooner policymakers in the US, Europe, Russia, and Ukraine realize this, the better. And to hell with the war profiteers. The state of Tennessee is poised to become the first in the nation to pass a law restricting drag shows, and that could also prohibit simply being trans in public. The state House and Senate have now passed the legislation. It heads to the governor's desk for signature. The bill is an astonishing attack on transgender people, artists, and entertainers. It stipulates that adult cabaret shows on public property or anywhere that a child might see them are strictly prohibited. A first-time offense is a misdemeanor. A second-time offense is a felony that could result in jail time. The bill defined adult cabaret shows very broadly. It can mean anything from people actually stripping to people just dancing, fully clothed, to, quote, male or female impersonators who provide entertainment that appeals to a prurient interest. Now, given that conservatives have defined simply being trans as overtly sexual and a tool for grooming, you can see how this law can be interpreted to criminalize just being trans in public. It would also essentially outlaw pride events and lead to the arrests of participants for dressing as they see fit, even if there's no nudity or anything. As legislative researcher Aaron Reed noted on Twitter, quote, "What even is a male or female impersonation? It's unconstitutionally vague and goes undefined in the law. Many people testified that transgender people are prurient by merely existing. Drag queen story hours will no longer be rushed by Proud Boys, but by cops." That's a valid concern, although to be fair, there's not much of a difference these days between Proud Boys and cops. Anyway, think of the morality police in Iran who are ensuring women meet certain dress codes, and now apply it to cops in Tennessee who will have the power to enforce dress codes during Pride. This should be a reminder that there's no satisfying the Christian fascists who have power in state legislatures around the country. They're pursuing an eliminationist agenda against LGBTQ plus people and won't stop until it's finished.
Under the island, if you dig in it, you might see gold and also metals. Nobody's ever found it.
Largo tiempo y si nos van a correr, que Dios provee un lugar para tanta gente porque es difícil andar en la calle.
I knew I was crashing, and that scared the piss out of me.
His first load on the dump truck.
I never had a sense of family, and your mom and you guys provided that for me. Deep down, I knew I couldn't hold on to it.
Friends, we're nearing the end of the Friday show, which means there's one thing left to do. Crown a Rich Dick of the Week. Thank you for all the nominations on social media. Rona, still at it, throwing in all the damn landlords, specifically landlords who complain online about tenants not paying rent. They seem to not be aware that, like any investment, being a landlord comes with risk. Go cry to someone else about it. Next up, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is nominated for his ongoing fascist remake of Florida's public education system. Then we have a couple nominations related to the ongoing crisis in East Palestine. First up, Pete Buttigieg, who after nearly 3 weeks finally visited the site of the train derailment. He was beaten to it by Donald Trump, which is pretty embarrassing for the Biden administration. And, of course, a very worthy nomination for the guy whose company is responsible for all this. Talking about the CEO of Norfolk Southern, Alan Shaw. I don't know. Seems like if your company is responsible for wrecking an entire town, you should probably resign. People with more honor might commit seppuku, but rich dicks have no honor. Vince McMahon is back in the nomination ring, and so too is Elon Musk, or Elno, as he is referred to here. And then there's a very strong nomination for companies using child labor. That would include McDonald's, which just recently got busted, but also Packer Sanitation Company, which was found recently by the Department of Labor to have been employing more than 100 children doing dangerous work in meatpacking plants, which reads like a headline from more than 100 years ago. The company was fined $1.5 million, which I'd say is getting off easy. Should probably also include state lawmakers who are trying to legalize child labor, like in Minnesota and Iowa. Thank you again for all these strong nominations, but in the end, this week's Rich Dick is former United States Senator Pat Toomey. Yeah, that's right. Thanks to Owen for the nomination on Twitter. Toomey retired from the Senate in January, and all it took him was about a month to step through the revolving door and cash out to work for an industry he's long been doing favors for as a lawmaker. Toomey announced he's joining the board of a giant asset management firm called Apollo Global, where he'll be paid a high six-figure number, or about triple what his salary was as a senator. As Lever News reported, Toomey has been heavily involved in preserving tax breaks that are directly related to Apollo Global's business operations, particularly the carried interest loophole, which allows ultra-wealthy private equity managers to pay lower capital gain tax rates of 20% on their income, as opposed to the regular top income tax rate of 37%. Twice in the last 5 years, it looked like Congress was going to close that loophole, and twice Toomey lobbied against doing that and won. Worth also noting that Toomey's new employer, Apollo Global, also lobbied against closing the loophole. During the debates over the Trump tax cuts in 2017, there was a populist push to get rid of that loophole and to not give the wealthy any more tax breaks, but Toomey was instrumental in squashing that. The Washington Post reported at the time, quote, "Behind the scenes, according to aides, lobbyists, and fellow lawmakers, Toomey played a major role in shaping the Republican tax overhaul, pushing not only for a cut in the top individual rate, but also helping slash rates for corporations and repeal a key provision of the Affordable Care Act." During the course of his career, Toomey received more than $4.5 million in campaign cash from the securities and investment industry. It was his top donor. He's pushed to limit regulation in that industry and introduce legislation that would give private equity firms more access to Americans' 401k holdings. In a statement announcing Toomey's appointment to the board, the CEO of Apollo Global, Mark Rowan, said, quote, "Pat has a reputation for independent thinking and leadership experience in policy areas relevant to Apollo's business." Independent thinking, huh? It's a weird way to describe a guy who spent his career as a lawmaker catering to the industry that gave him the most money. Toomey said in the same press release, quote, "After 18 years in the public sector, I'm excited to bring my differentiated perspectives to the board of Apollo." Differentiated perspectives. You have the exact same perspective as the firm, dude. You've literally been on the same side in every policy fight. Look, just take the money and go through the revolving door. Don't make it sound like this is anything other than a payout for decades of subservience. Now, I know some people might say, well, what the hell else is he supposed to do? Where's he going to go work? If he's not in public office, then by default, he has to join the private sector. To which I'll say, he's an old millionaire. I don't care. Go deliver Meals on Wheels or something. Pat Toomey, this week's Rich Dick. All right, friends, the show ends this morning with a sunrise from Arizona. It was sent in by Jesse on South Mountain in Phoenix. Enjoy. Thank you, Jesse. Show's over. Thanks for watching. Thanks to the team behind the scenes. Please subscribe to our YouTube and podcast channels if you haven't already. One day capitalism will fall. Until then, we're going to be right here. See you next week.